and I like DJ Payne's beats. I love when people give like this little shitty compliment because they're about to say something super trash about me.
All right, it's recording.
What's going down? It's the Music Entrepreneur Club podcast presented by Beatstars.com. This is episode 62. We're becoming progressively more and more unhinged with each episode. So actually, maybe Dame less so because he got a haircut, and I think the messiness of his hair is directly proportional to the kind of ideas that he espouses on this podcast. Me, I haven't gotten a haircut in I don't know how long, so I'm hanging by a thread.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're getting more comfortable. Or at least I know I'm getting more. I don't want to speak for you, but you've probably been comfortable from the jump. But just with the podcast and just expressing our thoughts, dealing with people that don't agree, and we don't mind when people don't agree. Like I want people to disagree. I encourage debate. I just hope that when people disagree, it's from a well thought place, like a well thought out place. And
it's not. It never is. Well, let me start out. I want to review. So last week we had a very controversial episode about Apple trying to take 30% commission off of individual producers' beat sales through their app. And it's a broad sweeping thing. It's affecting a lot of app developers, not just Beatstars. I think that one of the major differences is this is not affecting an app developer. This is affecting a user of a third-party marketplace. Me, I didn't sign up to sell my beats through Apple. I'm selling my beats through Beatstars. Beatstars is a third-party app. As long as Beatstars adheres to Apple's guidelines, then it should be all good. And we posted a clip to the MEC Instagram, and I think Abe did a great, number one, shout out to Abe for even coming on and speaking on this. How many times have you been a member of any kind of platform, whether it's social media or whatever, and when there's a major change to the platform, they decide on it behind closed doors and then they send you an email as an end user after the fact, like, oh, by the way, we're raising our rates, or by the way, we're changing our policies.
I think Beatstars is pretty transparent with the things, and that's big, right? And not to go on a tangent, but that's not. I saw United Masters make a post, and like United Masters made a post of like a receipt from DistroKid and like a receipt from United Masters, and they were trying to expose DistroKid for all the hidden fees. Which, if they did that with Beatstars, distribute their new distribution service, like there wouldn't be any fees, or their fees would be much lower because I think Beatstars is only $2 a month. That's besides the point. But I think it's interesting that United Masters will try to expose DistroKid for some hidden fees, which some of them aren't so hidden. But then I posted, I was like, okay, if you got, because in the post they're saying they're keeping it real and they're keeping it transparent. And I was like, okay, that's fair. But I was like in the comments, like, okay, why don't you keep it all the way real and talk about this first right of refusal that's in your agreement? Because I don't think they would talk about that. And I still don't understand why that's in that agreement. But that's besides the point, I guess. Like, Beatstars is pretty transparent. They're part of the community. They build a great community, and they're really fighting for creators. So shout out to Abe for coming on the podcast and explaining what's going down and kind of how he's fighting on the behalf of creators, not to, get a percentage to Apple on your beat sales through the app.
Yeah. So the whole fact-based thing. Yeah. I welcome debate too, because oftentimes I don't have the full picture. I try really hard not to, share my opinion on something, or rather, I try not to form a strong opinion on something I don't really understand. And so that's why I did my research. I read Apple's policies. I had a conversation with Abe before having him on the podcast just to really figure out what's going on and why.
Shout out to Payne for doing that, because nobody, yeah. I mean, even though that should be expected, obviously that's not what happens on the internet. It's just, Go with what you feel, and if all else fails, call somebody a name.
Yeah, which happens all the time. It happened recently. You were mad because I responded, but I'm like, someone actually argued with me in the comments, and then was so mad at my responses that they deleted their comments and then created a fake profile just to correct my grammar, which was totally false because I actually know grammar and English and they don't. So it was a hilarious series of mishaps. But I can't name how many friends or family members of friends and family members on Facebook that I've recently had to unfriend because they just see a meme and they share it and it's totally fake. I mean, whether it's the meme about, this is sick. I think it's absolutely sick. There's Martin Luther King Jr. got stabbed at one point. He didn't die. He was stabbed. There's a picture of him in a hospital bed recovering. Some dirty devil took that photo and created this whole meme about it saying Martin Luther King was actually smothered with a pillow. And everyone's sharing it. I'm like, what? Could you not have looked that up? Why are we going to disrespect the legacy of somebody who sacrificed his life with a meme that we don't even research? So I'm not trying to compare at all the fight for racial justice with this conversation about Apple's 30% commission, but it's just this mentality of not knowing the facts. So, people are already commenting, and you would think that people would want to contribute to the conversation and say, okay, let's figure out some solutions. Because the thing that I do appreciate about the podcast was that Abe didn't just come on here and say, this is what Apple's doing, we're mad about it. He's saying, here are the solutions that we're exploring. So it was really transparent. You're not going to see CEOs that involved with communicating the internal workings of their company with their users. But that, of course, it's the internet, as we all know. So, the comment that stood out to me was somebody saying, I'm in the tech space for 14 years and I like DJ Payne's beats. I love when people give like this little shitty compliment because they're about to say something super trash about me. Like, I really enjoyed Dame's beard, but he also stole $80 million from Funk Volume. It's like, something stupid is coming. So he said, I like DJ Payne's beats. Didn't even get my name right, but he is completely wrong. 30% is justified, and the Apple App Store is a marketplace. This video is based on personal opinion and not facts, as opposed to this guy's comment. When I let him know that factually what he was saying was incorrect, he said, I understand your frustration. However, Apple Store is an app marketplace subject to fees. It's been like this for a while. Apple has the right to change their policy at any time, which they didn't. That's something they tell you up front, but they didn't. These apps are free to download, blah, blah, and users can purchase subscriptions inside the app. And if developers choose to sell digital subscriptions inside the app, they use Apple's in-app subscription system and get a 30% commission. That's not what's happening here, you idiot. And you have the nerve to say my
14 years in the tech space, though.
He has 14 years in the idiot space. I don't even have the energy to come up with a witty insult because that's just idiotic. We're not talking, like, do you not, just don't argue. So let's review the actual facts. Fact number one, this is not a subscription service that Apple is taking a commission off of. We're talking about individual sales. So me as a user, we as producers who use Beatstars, we don't sell through Apple. We sell through a third-party app. We sell through Beatstars. Apple doesn't market or promote us. That's fact number one. Fact number two, Apple approved the Beatstars app, I think a year or more ago, as is. Beats and Beatstars are not consumed in the app. The app only allows users to buy the beats, not record to them, not open stems, nothing. Nothing within the app allows the end user to consume the product purchased in the app within the app. They're consumed outside of the app. You got to buy your beat, take it to the studio, import it into a DAW, Pro Tools, whatever it is, in order to actually use the product. It's not an in-app purchase. The other thing is, and this is what the idiot said, Apple has not changed their policies Their policies still say, if you go on their policies right now, they say no 30% commission for products that are consumed outside of the app. So they're violating their own policies by demanding 30%. It would still be trash if they suddenly change their policy and they're like, you know what, forget all that stuff we said, a couple years ago. We're changing our policy. Now we want 30% of everything. It doesn't matter what it is. We just want it. But they're not doing that. They're still sticking to their original policy, which is that based on their own wording, Beatstars should be totally fine and exempt from this 30% commission. Fact number 4, they're demanding 30% of individual producers' incomes. They're not asking for 30% on the app sales from Beatstars. They're asking for 30% of a beat that I worked hard to make and market and create, and that Beatstars infrastructure worked hard to make available to an end user. It has nothing to do with Apple. Apple did not work for that 30%. And then the other thing is, when this idiot's talking about 30% is standard, it's not. 30% is absolutely too high. If you look at the competitors, even if you look at it, some of the most evil companies like Amazon, they don't even take half of that from individual sellers. I think we established that Amazon was only taking 99 cents per purchase or something if you have a membership. So there's absolutely no facts with this opinion. I get, so Dame, you play devil's advocate a little throughout the conversation. That's 100% the right thing to do. This is a complicated conversation with some serious implications for producers and for app developers. So yes, let's ask questions. Let's challenge the CEO of Beatstars, but get your facts straight before you have that talk.
The only thing I would push back on a little bit is that, having the app available, I think Apple did do a little bit in terms of, because some people that purchase Beats might prefer to purchase within the app. And, Beatstars developed the app, but Apple made it possible for it to be distributed and for people to have the app on their phone. So like Abe suggested, like they should deserve like a transaction percentage, which is much smaller. But 30%, I think most people, except the person who you've coined the idiot, believe is a bit excessive.
Well, if they put that in their policy, if they said for products purchased to be consumed outside of the app, Apple will receive a 5% transaction fee from developers, that's fine because it's there in the policy. It's currently not there in the policy. So for me, anybody who says, yeah, it's cool, Apple is Apple, they can do whatever they want. Number one, you're probably not selling any Beats online. You're probably just a vulture that feels like at some point you're going to become the next Apple and you're going to fuck over creators too. And you just want to cover your moral ground so that you're already, on the same page with some major exploitation down the line. And morally, I'm not on the same page as you. I don't think it's morally right. I don't, those are not my principles. My principles are not tell people one thing and then do something else and try to snatch money out of their pockets. It's just, wow. I mean, I feel like that's it. That's it. Like, that's it. For me, that's the end of the conversation. Are you saying one thing and doing the other? Yes. Okay, cool. Then we're not part of the same team.
But I guess ultimately, if it's just, we have to know that, I mentioned this on the last podcast, like these platforms can change their policies at any time, right? And it's, again, Beatstars is catering to creators and Apple's catering to shareholders, especially and Apple's not suffering by no means. They're a very profitable company. They have hella cash on hand. However, if they ever did struggle, for a quarter or whatever, and they were looking for other departments to pick up the slack and make more money, best believe, they could examine their policies and be more aggressive, with all app developers or anybody that uses the app. That's not the case with Apple currently. They make a shitload of money, but that's what we always need to be prepared for, when we are using other people's platforms and services. Just like,
Yeah, I mean, you have to always watch out for people who are immoral and unprincipled in life. It's not just companies. But if an individual walks up to you and says, "Hey, give me $30, I will pay you back 40 tomorrow," and then the next day they go, by the way, I changed my mind. I'm not giving you shit. How do you feel about that person? Oh, that's their right.
right.
No, but we'll let a company do it, and you
but
guys will lick the boots of the Apple Store just because they're the Apple Store and you love your MacBook Pro. Okay, yeah, we're not on the same page. I just don't respect that as a human being on a human level, not on some corporatist, capitalist, entrepreneurial level. I don't respect that. So I guess I can end that conversation there.
And full disclosure, Payne is still a Green Bubble crew member, and he doesn't have any Mac products. I don't think any Apple.
No, I do. Yeah, I do. I have two MacBooks and.
Oh shit! Why do you have two MacBooks?
Stuff.
But you don't use them.
Yeah, no, I use them all the time. I use a MacBook to DJ. They're just more stable.
Well, the other thing that the idiot was correct about is that for the most part, actually, we do share a lot of facts on here, but then we also just have a lot of opinions. And again, we welcome, opinions that don't jive with mine or Payne's or both of us, and we welcome those in the comments. And sometimes we talk about them on future podcasts. So this would be another opinion. I want to talk about the Joe Budden podcast. Recently, he's been public with his dealings with Spotify. He signed a deal with Spotify a couple of years ago. It's up and they're supposed to renegotiate. And apparently he feels like his platform, his podcast is being undervalued, underappreciated. So he spent like an hour kind of breaking it down from his side. And I think that's what I want people to understand. Like anytime an artist or anybody goes public with an issue or a concern, it's like, it's his side of the story. And I'm not saying that he's lying, but there definitely is information that I would want to know to decide whether or not, I think his platform is being undervalued. I think first of all, like, I don't even know what he's asked. I don't know what he was offered. He makes, and I don't know what he was asking for. I don't know what the gap is. I know that he talks a lot about ownership and wanting creative control, and all of that's great. So, he's very good at what he does, right? Like Joe is very good at talking. He's very good at telling stories. He's very good at being passionate and engaging. So I understand how he's gotten to this point and developed the fan base that he has. But, in terms of wanting to seek the truth and having a better understanding of whether I think it's being undervalued or underappreciated, like there's just so many details that you need to feel. And I think that people are going to get lost in the story because he tells the story so well, and he like emphasizes certain things and downplays certain things. But unless you kind of have a business sense, and to be honest, I don't know the podcasting economics like I know like music economics. And I think it's a world that's still being developed. I think that there's a lot of things, like the deals that are happening today weren't the deals that were happening a year ago or 2 years ago. And he alluded to that. It was, for him, it was kind of a 2-year experiment for him to get as much data as possible so that he can properly value his asset. And I know that there were a lot of comparisons between his podcast and The Ringer. And that was one thing I wanted to talk about, because I think some people will listen to that podcast and think that The Ringer is the same as the Joe Budden podcast, and it's not. The Ringer is like 40 or 50 different podcasts. It's a company that's constantly producing new podcasts. So to compare Joe's one podcast to the entire network of the Ringer, and Joe has since came back on social media and said that he's a network too, which I don't quite understand. Maybe he's referring to the podcast that Maul and Rory are about to start, or maybe the other thing he's got, the pull up. But that's still 3 or 4 things versus like 50 podcasts. And what I also want people to understand is like, and I can compare this to kind of Funk Volume and our deal with Warner. Warner was not only interested in working with us because of what we were currently doing. They were assessing the talent of the foundation, the platform, and me. Like, can they continue to like develop artists that do well? Right. So I think the Ringer has proven that they can develop podcasts that can continue to do well. They groom talent. They can, so it's not just the current podcast. So I think that's another thing that Joe's downplaying or not acknowledging in this valuation, because it seems like, they gave the Ringer $250 million, but they bought it out. Like there's no licensing deal like that. So I don't know if I don't think he's expecting $250 million. And it seemed like, he kept saying they offered him 8 figures. Well, I don't even know if he said that exactly, but it seemed like they offered.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, I heard 8 figures, and then I think they turned it down. So I wonder if that was 8 figures in exchange for ownership, which right. I think you would agree that he probably shouldn't take.
I don't know what he should, to be honest with you. And that's what, people shouldn't, what I'm saying is, I don't necessarily, if this is a tactic to, bring other people to the table, I don't like this. I don't like drama as a negotiation tactic. Sometimes it works, but I think that, and even if it works this time, I think that's, fine. But like over the long haul, I don't think that's the best way to negotiate. And that's just an opinion. He may get what he wants and some. But I just don't like this. I want people to see like this comparison between the Ringer and what he's doing is totally different. So I think people should understand that. And just the fact that we're missing so much information. He says something about, there were some issues with, him not getting some vacation that he wanted after the fact. Like they had we have an agreement, vacation days should be in there. Like everything should be in your contract. And even this bonus, there's a bonus that he says they hit the metrics and they didn't get the bonus. I find that hard to believe, to be honest. Like if Spotify says, whatever the metrics are, watch time, number of views, whatever the metrics are, I find it hard to believe that if they hit the metrics, they didn't get the bonus, because then you'd have a legal case, right? Like there's some parts that were just hard to. Well,
believe. So we've talked about this before. We've talked about the contracts for signed artists with labels, and you're the one who broke down how tricky they can be. And I think you specifically focused on recoupment and how, yes, the agreement can say one thing, but there's some odd formula that undermines the language and the straightforwardness of the language. So for me, let me just be transparent. I'm number one, shout out to Joe Budden and shout out to Parks. I like both of them. I've worked with both of them. I support creatives. I support Black-owned creative outlets. So I'm going to be the guy that's digging my heels in, just because I don't know Spotify to be the most fair or transparent. I mean, we talk about the streaming rates, not saying that it's the same thing, but past behavior predicts future behavior, and Spotify has been one of the least transparent platforms out there for musicians. So I imagine that if Joe Budden and his co-hosts are complaining about transparency with Spotify, there's got to be a lot of truth to that, just based on what everybody else has said about Spotify.
But that's different than saying, hey, if you get 10 million views, I'm going to give you a bonus of $100,000. You hit 10 million views, and then they're like, nah. Like,
well, not necessarily, because what's a view, right?
But all that should,
you know how this stuff works.
All that should be defined. Like even in the music industry, like I've never, yes, things can be unclear, calculations can be weird, but never have I been involved in something that was on paper, and we did that, and the money didn't come that way with a legit company like Spotify. Like, just never. What I'm assuming happened is, like, either they didn't understand a particular metric, they didn't understand how a metric was calculated, and there's some confusion around that, because that, like, in what he's talking about, he should be like, yeah, and we're also suing them for this bonus that we didn't get because we clearly hit it. It said 10 million views, we got 10 million views, we clearly hit it. Like, why aren't you pressing for that? But I know I would be, because I'm sure it's a healthy amount of money. He went on to say that, instead of giving them money, they tried to give them like trips and like watches and just kind of shiny trinkets, and then they had the idea of giving some money away to their fans, which I think is a really dope idea. I'm always for, fan engagement and giving back to the fans in different kind of ways. And I think Spotify shut that down. But those are all things that, weren't agreed upon. Like, Spotify doesn't, like, most tech companies don't understand creative. They don't know how to work with creatives, So to me, I got to go to the contract. Like, did they do what the contract said they would do? And if they didn't pay a bonus that was supposed to be paid, then I think you have a legal dispute. So I don't agree with that piece. But I think the larger discussion around ownership, because I rock with Joe I think the truth is always somewhere in the middle. Like, I agree that we should always try to own, like, what we're doing, because ultimately longer term, there's more value in that. But there could come a day where you're offered sufficient value, or somebody overvalues your shit and you get paid off more than it's worth. Right. So it's detrimental to undervalue yourself. It could be even more detrimental to overvalue yourself. And there's just so much information that's missing for me to understand what Joe is doing. So I guess the story is to be continued. I'm curious to see where he ends up with this tactic. But I personally wouldn't be as loud with this negotiation. Ownership is great, but I think, sometimes ownership gets hyped up so much these days that I think, some people are shooting themselves in the foot. Like, some people should be taking the deals that are offered to them, but they're so tied up in ownership. You just have to properly value your asset. You have to, and I think Joe is smart in signing that 2-year deal to get the data to be able to properly value his asset. But none of that information is given to the public so that we can understand where he's going with it. So, I don't know. Because there's nothing wrong with a 9-to-5. So that's my opinion. And I know Dame Dash doesn't share that opinion, because with a 9-to-5 or with any deal, because Charlemagne is approaching this totally different. He works for iHeart. Joe, there was a follow-up to the last podcast where, Joe Budden talks about his conversation with Charlemagne. They're playing two different games, and I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong, but Charlemagne makes a lot of money. I'm sure iHeart pays them a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You can, and Envy makes a lot of money. Angela Yee makes a lot of money. Envy takes his money and he invests in a lot of real estate, which he owns, right? There's nothing wrong with making a lot of money from someone or from some entity, taking that money, investing it properly in things you own 100%, or starting a business. It doesn't all have to be ownership of the thing you're working at day to day. Like, we get so caught up in ownership, which I think it's important, but don't overvalue it and don't shoot yourself in the foot, because sometimes taking a deal makes sense. Take that money and invest it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it's hard for me to put myself in Joe Budden's position where, I still don't know how much Spotify gave them to start their 2-year contract. I would be frustrated. How much did Joe Rogan get for his Spotify deal?
A shitload.
Granted, it's the biggest podcast in the world,
right?
I think. But if it's like, this is what they gave me, this is what they're giving everybody else for subsequent deals, I'm going to be frustrated with all of the terms of the contract that haven't been fulfilled. I stand on the other side of the conversation, of the debate, with regard to signing a contract and not getting what I signed the contract for, because it's happened to me. I literally, and Adam Friedman, this is obviously, I'm not, no one's giving us money for this podcast at all. I think we once had an offer for sponsorship, and it was like a few $100s, and you told me don't take it. So you and Joe Budden have something in common. It's not a paycheck. It's the idea that you want all of the advertising and all the sponsorship to be run through you, so you continue having ownership of it. So yeah, he's turned down advertisers. You've turned down advertisers. I think
on a much smaller scale. But
you know how mad I would have been if it had been 8 figures or even 6 figures and you turned it down.
But the funny thing is like Joe, because on YouTube, that's how you make money, through ads. So when you watch his podcast on YouTube, and I was watching it this morning, because as soon as he was talking about the ads and how he doesn't have ads, it like cut to an ad. So, and I know that YouTube is separate. His podcast comes out on Spotify first, where there are no ads. And then he puts it on YouTube. But I was actually surprised to see that his YouTube, it's actually not that big of a channel, and I know that's only one platform where people listen to his podcast, but I would probably imagine that it's got to be the second biggest platform for him, separate from Spotify. It might even be the first. I don't know. I mean, because on podcasts, like when you go to see somebody's top songs on Spotify, you can see how many times it's been streamed. But when you go to podcasts, I don't think you can see how many times it's been listened to. So I don't know what kind of numbers he's working with. But the podcast numbers on YouTube, I expected him to be higher. Like, he doesn't even have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I thought he would be over 1 million.
But this is what I wonder, though. And if I were him, that would be more fuel to the fire of my frustrations, because if I have a chance to invest energy and attention into building up my YouTube following for my podcast, but the podcast has a partnership with Spotify, that puts me in a weird position. And so, it'd be like if a podcast network, well, you've done partnerships before, and then it's like, what do you do? Do you bolster the partnership, or do you invest in fortifying your other platforms? And then it kind of becomes a conflict of interest. So I think it's frustrating, and as a creative, I understand, and I don't see transparency. We started the podcast today talking about transparency. Beatstars is very transparent. Abe is coming out and telling you everything. Data ownership is a big thing for all creatives, and a platform like Beatstars gives you that. A platform like Instagram does not give you that.
But it's the same. Do they owe us? We have to know that transparency was never promised to us. Like, and that's not. And again, this is such this industry, podcasting, is still in its infancy, and it's still the economics behind it are still being developed. I think it's crazy that podcasts on Spotify don't get paid out. Like, there's no stream. Like, we don't get money for the streams or listens on Spotify. I think that's I think that's crazy. And at some point, I would think that would change. Maybe not. I don't know. But my point is, like, they're still like learning like how this develop. So they're gonna pull different levers, put some back, they're gonna change and move around the pieces. And we've never been promised transparency to what that looks like, right? Now that Spotify is a public company, the transparency is to their shareholders, not to the creatives that fuel the platform. And it's the same thing with Apple.
Yeah. Doesn't it? Okay. So then there's the other element of being a musician, putting your music on Spotify, hearing the Spotify CEO say, we're not going to change the royalty rates, and having the labels also resist at every turn because they're getting the majority of streaming revenue because of the way their deals are structured and because of the way streaming pays out. And then as all this is happening, as it's this constant battle between creatives and streaming platforms, you hear that Joe Rogan gets $100 million from Spotify, a company that is consistently claiming they can't afford to pay a higher royalty rate. And I know where you stand, and I agree with you, Dame. If the royalty rates were increased, even if they were doubled, tripled, quadrupled, it still wouldn't really be significant to the people who are getting very little right now.
But you're also comparing apples and oranges, right? Like when they're deciding to pay Joe Rogan whatever he got, $100 million, the financial model that they built in terms of the additional revenue that was going to bring in, like they justified it somehow in terms of all the benefits that they would receive, additional subscriptions, maybe that would allure additional talent to the platform. Like, so we can't necessarily say like, okay, since they gave Joe Rogan $100 million, that means they must have the money to pay, artists more money, because they're not looking at it like that. They're looking at how that will be profitable. And then they're looking at, how profitable the music is in terms of how many subscriptions and how much retention that the music has on the platform.
Yeah, it's still frustrating from a creative standpoint.
And I think that's one dope thing about this podcast is that and what blew up Funk Volume is like, we're always gonna, like, business and music has to work together, right? Like, creators want a career, so they have to make money. They have to have a business mindset. They have to work with business people. So we have to understand where business people are coming from, even when it gets you frustrated as shit and you say you don't understand, because they don't understand creatives. Like, so we got to understand both sides to this, because that's how you set your business up the right way. You understand the incentives of the people you work with, the people you get involved with, and so there'll be less surprises along the way. So I think it's important to have these conversations, and I think it's important to challenge businesses, because I think sometimes businesses are just blind, and I think decisions can be made that are in both the business's best interests and the creators, and hopefully we can find more of those, to have a more harmony amongst the two.
The real lesson here is that this podcast needs to bring on more guests from the alt-right so that we can get a Spotify bag too.
No, definitely not. I really don't even. We'd probably lose some listeners if we started talking about our politics. I know for a fact if Funk Volume still existed and I was as vocal as I am on my personal pages, we would have lost some fans.
You need to purge your personal page, man. Every time you'll post like the most inoffensive stuff, and someone will come from left field, and actually from right field, if we're being politically accurate, and attack you. It's hilarious. It's not hilarious, but just the level of outrage that some of these people feel is.
I mean,
funny.
Sometimes it's annoying, but the way I justify it is like, we're all in our own little bubbles, even on social media. Our friends are our bubble. The people we connected to are our bubble. And, the fact that I got so many people on my personal Facebook page that came from Funk Volume and other walks of life that I don't really know, that aren't part of my bubble, that will attack me or say different things. I think it's important for me to know that those people really do exist. Like those people are real, because in my mind, they wouldn't be otherwise unless I interacted with them. So I guess but I have blocked a shitload of people too. Like my block list is pretty damn long. Like if I scrolled, it would take me a minute to get down to the bottom.
That's why, and I was so confused. I'm like, why does Dame have so many asshole friends? Like, did someone unknowingly or out of malice subscribe him to like a racist newsletter or something, and it just snowballed from there? What's happening?
Nah, so it's primarily Funk Volume, but I made the mistake early days to just like send hella friend requests to people, because I was thinking, like a lot of spamming rappers do right now. It's like the more people I'm connected to, the more people I can just like send our links to, right? Or not, I didn't send individual links to people, but like the more people I was connected to, the more people that would see the stuff that I post. So that was just a stupid thing for me to do very early on that I'm paying for now. But also, a lot of Funk Volume fans, in the Midwest, and a lot of them probably are Trump supporters, and it would have been very difficult for me to continue to run that label, or at least be vocal, because the Funk Volume page wasn't a political page, but every once in a while, sometimes I would just test it. I would throw something out there that was like slightly sensitive, just to see how people would react. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of "Make America Great Again." If I went to a show and had to see some hats in the crowd, I'd have been hot.
Well, if you think you have it bad, Chris Stapleton just recently came out in support of Black Lives Matter. So I can't imagine what he's going through. On that note, shout out to Chris Stapleton. This is the Music Entrepreneur Club podcast powered by Beatstars. We are a free music business mentorship program. It's open to the public. www.musicentrepreneurclub.com, www.beatstars.world. Every Monday and Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's what we have going on. So today, log on. If you got this on a Monday or a Thursday and it's before 3 p.m.